Good morning, everyone. Thank you for turning up. My military pass means I can't really leave it any longer to start, so sorry for being too punctual. If anyone comes in, then you may have to just let them through. I'm here to talk about the General Data Protection Regulation, which comes in 1 month yesterday, so I hope we're all prepared. And I want to just give some tips and tricks about how to remain compliant and how to stay compliant beyond May 25th. Yes, can you hear? It covers the whole of the UK. In fact, covers the whole of Europe. And Brexit doesn't matter because we have a data protection bill, which is the GDPR in any case. Okay. Where was I? Yeah, so it starts in a month, and it is the start. It's not the finish. It's not like Y2K, where those of you who remember it, we all wondered if our computers would work on the 1st of January 2000, and of course they did. However, this is more akin to HSE law, where you have to be constantly compliant, constantly looking at your processes, your procedures, and what you're doing. Your businesses will change, your organisations will change, and so therefore you must change with it. So, what I want to go into is looking at some of the key principles of the GDPR initially. You can see the main principles around the outside, and there are 6 of them. I won't go into all of those in too much depth, but I want to talk about in more depth 3 of the 4 issues in the diamond in the middle. So accountability, demonstrability, and transparency. The reason I want to talk about those is because that's what Elizabeth Denham, the Information Commissioner who runs all things data protection in this country, has said she wants companies to demonstrate. So, first thing I want to look at is the legal basis for data processing. So, on the whole, companies will choose, or organisations like yours will choose one of 3, there are 6 legal bases, but the 3 that you're most likely to concentrate on will be consent, legitimate interest, and contract. So consent will be something like, yes, please send me my marketing information on such and such, which I'll go to in a bit more detail. Legitimate interest is a bit more complex. You must make sure that you do a legitimate interest assessment, a balancing test, to make sure that the interests of the organisation don't override those of the data subject, the consumer. Okay. Contract, that is where somebody buys something from you. So you go online to buy a motor insurance policy from Direct Line or something like that. There is a contract. You buy something from Boots. Okay. Sometimes you might have 2 different legal bases for different activities. So you buy something from Boots online, and then there's a tick box at the bottom asking you for your consent for them to send you marketing messages. Given the nature of most of your activities here, I thought I'd do a bit of a paragraph on medical data. Medical data is defined as special data. Okay, this means you must have special security requirements and also special legal purposes. And I put 3 of them. Again, there are more in the GDPR, but I think the 3 most relevant for you guys would be as follows. Explicit consent. So you are asking people to give consent for you to process their medical data. Okay. So if you think of, I was speaking to the Limbless Association yesterday. They have information on people's medical condition. Vital interests of somebody who's physically or legally incapable of giving consent. Clearly, there are people who are disabled and may have other conditions which may mean that they cannot give consent themselves, and therefore somebody else has to do it for them. And then processing is necessary for the purposes of preventative or occupational medicine if the data is processed by or under the responsibility of a professional. I think the professional is defined as a doctor, basically, in this context. So I know a lot of you do deal in a lot of medical data or deal with people who have medical conditions because that's the services you're supplying. Okay? you must be very careful on the legal basis that you are going to process that data. It must be very clear. Okay, and we'll come on to transparency in a minute. So, one of the key things is accountability. So, you are accountable for the life cycle of the data. You will collect it from somebody. Okay, that's the beginning part. You will then process it in some way. So you will sell them goods and services. You will send them marketing material. Whatever it is you're doing, that's your internal processing. And at the end, each processing activity must have an end point. You just can't keep things forever and hope that nobody will find it. Okay? It must have an end of life. So, are you going to delete it? Are you going to anonymize it? And what is your retention schedule? So every data processing activity must have a retention schedule, okay? And you must stick to it. Now there are some legal retention schedules that you must stick to. So for example, in terms of your employees' payroll, remember this applies to employees as well as to consumers. In terms of your employees' payroll, you will have to keep that data for 5 years beyond the end of this financial year. Okay, that is the tax rule in this country. For employee HR data, you must keep the data for 6 years after they have left your organisation. Again, that is written in law, so that overrides the GDPR. But beyond that, you have to come up with a retention schedule, and you must stick to it. So that is the life cycle of the data. You're also accountable for the value chain of the data. So where are you getting the data from? Are you buying it from a marketing list company? If you are, then were the right consents given by the people on that list for you to use it? Okay? You can't have a sort of general consent of, oh yes, we'll give it to anybody. Alright? So you must be, on the whole, most organisations are collecting it from an individual. But you must be very clear where you're getting that data from. You must then be very clear of what you're doing with the data, and does that relate to some form of legal process? Okay? And then, are you going to use external processors and recipients? Now, my favourite case study at the moment, of course, is Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and this is where Facebook fell down. They did not understand what Cambridge Analytica were going to do with this data. You are duty bound in order to understand that and to check it. So if you're going to send your personal data you have collected to somebody else, you must make sure that they comply with the GDPR. Okay, that is the onus upon you. Okay, it's not your data; it's the data belongs to the data subject. You are the data controller. You must give it. You must check, that the people you give it to are also compliant. Transparency is the next issue I want to talk about. So I'll give you something to read now. I hope you can all see that. That's not all right these days. Okay, we've got about 5 double negatives in there. So we can't have that these days. Okay, transparency. What is transparency? So you must be very clear about what you're going to do with that data when the data, wherever it is collected. So if you're asking people to fill in a form, if you're asking people to apply either on paper or online, at that point you must tell them what you're going to do with the data. And you'll probably give them a link to your privacy policy as well on the internet. If it's a paper form, you might have your privacy policy on the back of the form, for example. Okay, but you must be very clear what you're going to do with people's data. So again, if we look at the Cambridge example and Facebook example, you're one of the 270,000 people that filled in that questionnaire or that quiz, and they said something like, we're going to give your data to some bloke in Cambridge, England, and he's going to do something with it. And whilst we're on your Facebook page, can we take all your friends' data as well? Would you have taken the quiz? Probably not. Okay? So there's an example of what not to do. Well, they didn't obviously do anything because nobody knew what was going to happen. And that's the point. Nobody knew when they were taking that quiz what was going to happen to their data. All right? Data privacy notice, privacy policy, privacy statement, people call it different things. It should be on your website along with a cookie policy as well, detailing what you're going to do with all the various bits of data that you are collecting, the legal basis you are using, and anybody you're going to send it to. And also if you're going to send it abroad. Okay? And there are some special things on international transfers as well. And there must be a clear statement on the reasons and the purposes for processing. And that's all you can do with that information. Okay? If you say, we're going to send you a newsletter, then that's all you can send to those people, because that's the purpose for the processing of that personal data. So make sure your purposes are broad enough. So it might be, we're going to send you a newsletter and other information about events. Okay, then you're slightly better covered. Okay, the preference is to have a preference center so people can pick and choose the various processes, the processing activities, and also perhaps even the media you're going to use. So whether it's post, telephone, email, or SMS. Okay. So let's look at some good practice. What have we got here? So I've put a very clear, a very simple marketing statement there. So it requires a statement or clear affirmative action. So something like, I would like to hear about your notices, and there's a checkbox. Okay, by submitting your details, you consent to, would be another way of doing it. So that would be a statement. Freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. The example I gave before was none of those. Yeah? May not rely on silence, inactivity, and pre-tick boxes. That's why I haven't ticked this box. Okay, because I didn't want to give a pre-tick box. May not be bundled with other agreements or declarations. So, you can't say, chance to win a free iPad if you give your consent to. Okay? So it's give consent to marketing, and then a separate one is have a chance to win our free iPad, or enter our prize draw, or whatever it is. Supply of services must be not contingent on consent. Perhaps the only exception obviously would be medical data, which needs explicit consent. Separate consent for distinct processing operations, and I'll come on to an example on that in a minute. Data subject must be informed of the right to withdraw consent at any time. So if you do have a statement like this, you can see that you can withdraw consent or hit the unsubscribe button. Yeah? That will put them on the suppression list. So that's really looking at consent here. Now, I'm now a season ticket holder at Fulham Football Club, who went very close to automatic promotion, and we're very excited. We need Cardiff to lose again. Luckily, Derby beat them the other day, so we're all right. One more game, and they've got a harder run in than we have. Anyway, aside from the football, I don't mean for you to read this, but you can see here on the top one it says opt in to Fulham Football Club. Yes, I wanted to do that. Okay, opt in to official partners. That's, you know, their shirt sponsors and other of their official partners. Not sure I wanted to do that, so I didn't take that one. And there were 5 of them in total. They gave me 5 different processing operations. Okay, and it also I could choose the media. So do I want phone, email, and so on and so forth. I thought this was actually a very good example. I didn't sadly advise them on this one, but anyway, that was good. So, if you want to sign up for Fulham Football Club, that's the way to go. So, demonstrating compliance. Now, this is where life beyond the 25th of May really comes in for you guys. So, there are 10 things here, and I'll run through them pretty quickly. Data privacy notice, I've already mentioned that. Internal policies. You are going to possibly get lots of subject access requests, requests for erasure of personal data. Lots of these things are going to come up because people are now much more sensitized to their rights, especially after Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and so these things are going to come up more often. HR procedures for movers and leavers. That's one that's often forgotten. You have somebody who's working in an area with a lot of privilege, and in terms of the access they have to various systems and databases and what have you, they move to an area which doesn't have so much access. Okay, everyone forgets to turn off that access. Passwords, that's an obvious one. Clear desk policy. It's amazing what you see lying around in offices. Okay, and that's company confidential information as well. Data protection training, that has to be annual. You can do it online, or organisations such as myself can come and do it in person, which might be a good idea since this is all new for a lot of people first up. Data protection impact assessment, I'm not going to go in. This is if you have a new technology and you want to use a new process, you have to understand, and this is the data protection by design and default, you have to really understand what are the impacts on data protection and data security of your new process. Okay, and that has to be done up front, because if it's not baked in at the beginning and it's retrofitted, A, it'll be more expensive, and B, if you can bolt something on, you can bolt it off again. Okay, so important you do that. Your contracts with third parties, I was talking about that earlier. The recipients you're sending data to, you must have written contracts with them. Okay, and they must have data protection and confidentiality clauses within them, and also should there be subject access requests and the other rights of the data subject, they must help you to fulfill those. Personal data breach plan. We'll come on to breaches later, so we'll talk about that in a bit. And implement and enforce all these measures. Okay, this is not a tick box exercise that's easy to do. It's constant, and you will need to demonstrate compliance. So these are the organisational measures. And the GDPR talks about technical and organisational measures, so let's look at some of the technical ones. The IT gurus amongst you will know all about vulnerability assessments and penetration tests. Obviously one is more intrusive than the other, so please probably run the vulnerability assessments more often than the pen tests, but it's important that you do that. Access control to your software systems and compartmentalised shared drives. Again, not everybody should be able to get into the HR folder. Not everybody should be able to get into the finance folder. Patching of systems. Everyone remembers the WannaCry attack last year. Hundreds of thousands of organisations across Europe were hit by a random attack, including most of the NHS. Reason? They didn't patch their systems. So you've got your IT team doing your global systems, as it were, and then you as individuals and your staff must you know those infuriating updates from Microsoft Outlook and 365, and you get them constantly. Well, do it over lunch, take the crossword and go and sit in the cafe or something while it updates itself. We'll do it at the end of the day. Okay, important that you play your part and take individual responsibility, as not just rely on the IT team to do it. Risk assessments. Again, your IT people should be doing InfoSec risk assessments to decide what data is at risk and what mitigating measures can they put in place. Phishing exercises, again, the introduction of malware and other viruses is usually through phishing. Apparently I've got Bitcoin. No, I haven't got Bitcoin. Okay. Encryption of data at rest. There's various surveys that show how if data, how many companies don't encrypt their data at rest or in transit. All right, we'll come on to data breaches again, but if it's encrypted, you may not have to inform the ICO or the data subjects. And security training, again, excuse me, part of the phishing exercise, get your IT teams to brief people on information security. Retention schedules. Okay, so I talked about this a little bit. All data must be kept secure, up-to-date, accurate, and for a defined period of time. Oh, but we might need it later is not good enough anymore. Any data breach must be reported to you straight away. You can then decide as the controller whether or not to report the breach either to the ICO and or to the data subject. Again, that's your decision, and it will depend on what data has been taken or has been lost. Okay? And the reason you would take that decision to inform people is there is a risk of the rights and freedoms of the data subject. And you only have 72 hours to tell the ICO, and there's an awful lot of information to gather within that time. So you should have a plan and stick to it, and rehearse it, sorry. So let's look at some of the reasons for data breaches. So negligent insider, I mean, don't mean to sound rude, but that's the person who sent the email to the wrong recipient. That's the person who lost their laptop, the person who lost the USB stick. When I say negligent, it means they didn't mean to do it, as opposed to malicious, where they did mean to do it. Okay? Third parties is nearly 20%. So all that data you're sending out to various recipients, there's a 1 in 5 chance that they're going to be the cause of your breach. Okay? Malicious outsider, that's the hacker. Okay, that's the ransomware, that's WannaCry. There are plenty of warnings on this, and that's why you need your patching and your systems up to date. Malicious insider, that's a disgruntled employee, okay, who's put a spanner in the works for some reason and stolen your data, corrupted your data, altered it, changed it, nicked it, anything you like with it. Okay, so those are the sort of reasons, and you can see actually one of the most common causes is somebody just making a mistake. They've lost a phone. They sent the email to the wrong person. Okay, and there are lots of case studies on this. So, breach planning. You must have a data breach plan. Okay, who's going to investigate this? Don't just leave it to the IT people. Okay, it's not all their responsibility. Who's going to collate this information? Who's responsible for this? Who's going to make the decision of whether to inform the ICO of the data subjects? Who's going to liaise with the ICO? Have you got a data protection officer? You may have somebody in-house who's permanently there. You may have somebody who's doing part-time, always a bit dodgy, I always think. They've got other things to do, and that will probably be what they concentrate. Or have you got a third party, a bit like the data guardians, who do that for you? Who's going to inform the data subjects? Well, there's need PR agencies, external resources. Okay? If you've got a very large number of data subjects being affected, are you going to have to engage some form of call center in order to handle the number of calls? And then you've got to rehearse this. Okay? There's no good thinking, oh, we've got that, put it on the shelf, let it gather dust. Okay, people have to understand what their roles are. So, why is all this important? Okay, if we remember in 2017, a memory stick was found with Heathrow's security plans. Everyone remember that? So, a couple of questions here. Why did that person have access to that data? Were they allowed it? Should they have had access to it? Why did they put it on a memory stick? What were they going to do with that memory stick? Or was this a malicious insider? Not sure. This person clearly, why wasn't that memory stick encrypted? Again, if it had been encrypted, nobody would have been any the wiser. They would have just found some memory stick with a whole bunch of garbage in it that they couldn't do anything with. And then lastly, this person cannot have thought about what they were doing. They knew that they had very sensitive information on that memory stick, and they still didn't put it on a chain around their neck or something secure. Okay? To put it in your pocket where your handkerchief is when you pull out your handkerchief and it falls on the floor to blow your nose. Clearly this person didn't think about what they had. So if you are sending personal data on an email, via a memory stick, have a think about what are the risks if this goes wrong. Remember, email is a bit like having a postcard. The postman that collects it can read it, the guy in the sorting depot can read it, and the postman who delivers it can read it. Email's a bit like that. So how are you going to secure it? Are you going to password protect it? Are you going to encrypt it? There are various technologies out there to help you. Or if it's internal, can you just send a hyperlink instead of sending the actual document? So there are lots of things that this example gives us, a lot of food for thought. Now, the other ones I wanted to highlight is just the sheer size of the numbers. 2013, 3 billion users of Yahoo had their details hacked. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Okay. Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, on the Yahoo one, 350 million was knocked off their sale price. That's dwarfed by what happened to Facebook, which at one point was over 50 billion taken off the valuation of that company. That's much bigger than the 4% fine the ICO could give you. All right? It's all about consumer trust, and the markets deserted Facebook at that time. Okay? Mind you, they do say he earned, I think they say he earned 4 billion a day because he was so much better than the senators that were talking to him when he went to their select committee. So this is why this is important. Okay? So, on data breaches, I haven't given it, well, the hacking one is the Yahoo one. More and more companies are getting hacked now. It's becoming increasingly prevalent. All right, so you've got to guard yourselves against that. So that's it. I've got plenty of time for questions. My name is Matthew Lamb. I am the Data Guardian, and there are my details.